Hi there, and welcome to our November Developer Hangout here at Xero. My name is Ronan Quirk, Product Manager for the Developer Platform, and beside me I've got Adam Moore, who is our Product Owner for the Xero API. And on the call today, we've also got Riley over in Melbourne. Give us a wave, Riley. And Regan in Auckland as well. Give us a wave, Regan. Beautiful. Cool. So for today's Hangout, we're just going to be covering a few things. It'll take about 45 minutes to run through, and hopefully at the end, if you do have any questions, or as we're going through this stuff, if you do have any questions, do please let us know in the question box underneath the Hangout. So first of all, I'll get an update on what's going on in add-on world from Regan, and then we'll talk about recent API releases and what's coming next, which is always an important topic. I'll give a quick update on the marketplace, the add-on marketplace that we launched a couple of months ago, and Riley will be fielding questions, and we might get Riley to give us an update on some of the payroll API stuff as well that's been recently released. So, as I said, in the comment field on the video, you can drop in a question, or we're keeping an eye at Xero API on Twitter. And if you missed it, as always, we absolutely appreciate you dropping in any questions you have into our developer community at xero.com/developer. Awesome. So I'll just make sure we've got Regan unmuted, or he can unmute himself there, and we'll have a little bit of a whirlwind tour of what's new in add-on world. So, hey, Regan.
Yeah, thanks, Ronan. So we've got about 17 new add-ons since last time we spoke. A lot of really interesting add-ons coming into the marketplace now, and the team are doing a really good job bringing them on board. So some interesting ones there. Click Desk, which is a live chat and help desk application where you can create invoices straight from the chat window that go into Xero. We've got iAgri, which is a farming management solution, and also A2X, which is links to your Amazon account, and you can bring all of your information straight into Xero as well. Leap, which is a legal practice management piece of software from the UK, and Advisorify, which is a BI tool. So lots of really cool add-ons which are coming in. If you've got anything that you do want to look at getting certified, just remember to come to developer.xero.com and follow through the process there to becoming a partner. And then upcoming events. So we've got lots of stuff happening at the moment. In particular in Australia, we've got our Summer of Add-ons kicking off. But of course, anyone in the world can watch it. They're 30-minute webinars that make it easy to get used to the add-ons that we're presenting. So a 30-minute webinar on each add-on each day. Starts on Monday, the 1st of December, and runs to the end of January. So they're going to be at 11:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time each day. And if you want more details on that, you can go to xero.com/au/SOA and register for the events there.
I was just going to say, Riley, do you want to jump in and give us just a little bit more background on the Summer of Add-ons?
Yep. Yeah, so the Summer of Add-ons is all just about getting some more information out to partners about the different add-ons that we have out there. It's all off the back of the October Roadshow that we had in Australia, and some of the feedback we had from that was that partners really understood what an add-on was once they saw the cloud integrators get up on stage and take them through a few demos where they connected the add-ons, and they used a full use case of this is a business that's using Xero and a bunch of add-ons, and this is what it looks like when they connect them this way, and then they send an invoice around like this, and their purchase orders come in like that, and just going through those full workflows, it started to really make a lot of sense. So off the back of that, we just wanted to keep that sort of content coming. So webinars will be partly information that's useful to pass over to the clients, like who's this product for, what sort of problems does it solve, but then there's also going to be a component of it that will be jumping into the product and actually seeing how things connect, how data is sent between the applications, or whatever that functionality that the integration provides, just so that the advisors really sort of get in their headspace and understand what it's all about, and what being an add-on really means. And that's really the focus of it.
Awesome. Cool. And in terms of, so we've got the add-on exhibitors lined up for that already in terms of doing the webinars. But that's the sort of stuff that if you're not even, if you didn't sort of get a chance to do that this time around, certainly let us know if you're interested in doing it next time around, because I'm sure if this is successful, we'll be doing it again, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it is something that will probably be an ongoing thing, but have to wait and see if it's successful first.
Absolutely. Cool. Awesome. All right, Regan, so we've managed to get through point 1 already. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, so we're also continuing our Meet the Add-ons thing up in the UK. So if you're in or around the London area and want to catch up with some of the add-on partners there, we've got the second in that series on the 4th of December. So contact James Coleman for that. Also, XeroCon London's coming up on the 10th and 11th of February at Battersea Evolution. Great opportunity for anyone that wants any exposure. It's going to be a really huge event. We've got Karen Brady from West Ham Football Club speaking, and also David Rowan, the editor of Wired. It's going to be a bit of a developer catch-up there soon, which we'll have some details on later. Unless, Ronan, you got anything else to say about that?
Not at this stage, no, but we'll definitely be looking forward to doing some sort of a catch-up or event around XeroCon, since there'll be so many add-on partners and other developers around at the event.
Cool. And then also XeroCon Auckland, just putting a little save the date there for the 31st of April and 1st of May. That's going to be on Auckland's waterfront, so if you haven't been to Auckland before, I highly recommend visiting. We're a beautiful city full of beautiful people, so any add-on partners from overseas that want to come in and hang out with us, that would be a great event to catch up on as well. And then XeroCon Denver has just opened for pre-registration, so that's the 2nd and 4th of June next year. And again, it's going to be a massive event for all of our add-on partners, so we'd really like to see as many of you there as we could.
Cool. And we're not forgetting about XeroCon Sydney. We just, I don't know if we've got any dates quite locked in for that yet, so it'll probably be still August time frame. Thumbs up from Riley if it's still sort of August we're thinking of, but possibly Melbourne instead. But I'm not going to give anything away that we haven't already announced, so shh. Nobody heard that? Nobody heard that. Okay, moving swiftly onwards before I get fired. Xero product releases. So I guess it's important, as we always say, to keep you folks informed about what's going on in the main product, because hopefully the useful stuff within that we could expose by the API will trickle down in time. Contact account numbers is something that you know a little bit about, Adam.
Yeah, so contact account number, or the account number field as it's shown through the UI, is basically just another attribute of a contact, and it's editable through the UI. So I guess how it fits in with what we've already got via the API is the contact number, which I know a lot of the add-ons are using to sync up their contacts with Xero. This, I guess, adds in an extra field that well, users and add-ons can use, but with the difference that it is editable by users in the API, in the user interface.
Yeah, so at the moment you've got the contact ID, which is the GUID, unique reference of the contact. But if you've got another application, in the last few years you've had the contact number field that's available. And so if you've got a database row or some sort of identifier in your own application and you want to sort of attach that to a contact in Xero to keep track of them, you've traditionally been able to use the contact number, but that wasn't editable via the UI, so an end user couldn't actually kind of modify that. They could see it, but they couldn't modify it. Yeah. And so when we looked at providing a unique field that a customer could edit within the application, we wanted to keep separate the contact number, even though it's a little bit confusing. We wanted to keep that separate so your existing integrations aren't going to break if somebody tries to go in and edit a sort of a field in there.
Yeah.
So contact ID is unique reference against the contact. Contact number is something you can set only via the API. Useful if you want to sort of sync across your identifiers from your own system. And then account number is something that the user would sort of probably manage themselves if they want to attach that to a specific customer.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Might have to draw a map for people later on, but I think we've explained it as best we can. Additional V2 reports. So if you're kind of watching, if you're a Xero user yourself, you'll see the new UI and new reports continuing to trickle in. As we've said, I think they're doing sort of 1 or 2 a month at this stage at the moment, so they're really building up a head of steam on that. Receipting. Receipting is something which basically, if you've got sort of creating an invoice on the fly that's already been paid or something like that, so you don't want to send a customer the actual invoice itself, you can actually just send them a receipt. So that works for both invoices and receive monies, I think, as well, in the application as well. Probably not a lot of use cases in the API. It's more a workflow that you'd be using if you're kind of running things within Xero. But we'll definitely look at if there are potential options for doing that. Deleted and voided items. So this is interesting actually, because we do know that by the API sometimes you can get in some data and need to void it later on or something like that. So by default, in some of the views, like looking at your sales invoices or your bills or something like that, by default it does show voided and deleted items prior to our release on Monday. So what we've done is we've made a sort of an opt-in flag for you to actually see them in that view. So it just kind of cleans up the UI then, in terms of just sort of, we're not hiding the deleted and voided, but they just don't get shown by default. So if you did have an integration which sort of, maybe accidentally pumped in a whole bunch of sort of invoices that you want to then delete or something like that, then they're not cluttering up the UI. So that's good. Adam's a bit of an expert on Safari and older versions. So end-of-life support for a couple of browser versions, IE9 and Safari version 6.1 or less. Again, these are things that are sort of within the Xero sort of application itself, but I guess mindful of the fact that, sort of some screens, obviously the authentication screen, or maybe you support different browsers and we don't. I guess it is important that people are aware of what sort of browsers we support here at Xero, so we have some sort of commonality in terms of what you as a developer might support in terms of your application, and we do too. There is a support page in help.xero.com which lists the browsers that we support, but basically all the modern ones. And delighted to see IE9 is no longer considered modern. Cool. So just finally to wrap up in terms of the main product, there's a couple of features that the team have been working on, and I guess we're tracking that progress, Adam, aren't we as well?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming out in the earlier part of next year, and so we're just tracking that along as the API team, so that we can follow, pretty much as close as possible behind them and make all those things available via the API. Yeah.
So no surprises really in terms of what's already been communicated, but lots of different teams at Xero working on different things. But the main things would be quotes, inventory, improved reporting, and improved search as well. Cool. All right, now into the exciting part of it, API releases. Adam, do you want to give us a rundown on what we've been up to?
Yeah, sure. So I guess top of the list, most exciting, is the much waited for update and creative tracking categories and options. Something we've been working along for a while. So we were really pleased to get that out, because I know there's a lot of people waiting for that. One thing I did just want to mention was with the number of tracking categories you can only have 2 active at one time, and 2 archived with a maximum of 4 in total. With the options, we haven't set a specific limit on how many options we'll allow you to put in there. There's no limit through the UI either. But there is some performance considerations, I guess, once you start getting into big numbers of options. And the general rule of thumb we use is about 100 options per tracking category is sort of the advisable limit. Performance obviously depends on how people are using it and how many invoices and transactions and things they're doing, but it's not designed to be the sort of thing where you're creating thousands of of options, say.
Yeah. So it's not really sort of designed for kind of tracking jobs and that kind of thing. I know some people do kind of use it for that, but the intention is that it's kind of more for sort of report centers and cost centers and that kind of thing, or like say for example, if you had salespeople, that's something you might track, or if you have different branches or regions and that kind of thing. So one of the things that did slow us down a little bit in the development was that some of the complexities around the active versus the total number of tracking categories, and also just some of those intricacies. So just running through that again. So within a Xero organization, you can have a maximum of 2 active tracking categories, and within each tracking category, then you can have many options. So that's the kind of things that you actually associate with a line item in a sales invoice or a purchase invoice or whatever it is. But in addition to those 2 active ones, you can also have another 2 that have been archived. Say you used them in the past and you don't want to delete them because there's transactions against them, but they're sort of in the background. So you've got 2 active that you can code to, and a maximum of 2 in addition that can be archived, and then options within them.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Contact account number.
Yeah, cool. So as I did a terrible job of explaining before, it's another identifier in the sort of crowded area of contact identifiers that we've got now, but it is sort of its own unique, or it does support its own sort of unique use cases, being editable via the API and the UI. So.
And now, and so in terms of support for that, because I know if say for example you're creating an invoice and you want to specify, you can specify. Obviously, you have to associate an invoice with a contact. You can specify a contact ID. You can specify a contact number as well, can't you? Yeah. Or just use the name as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if we support the account numbers for one of those specifiers.
No, not at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Right. So if you are specifying on an invoice, our recommendation is to ideally use the contact ID or the contact number alongside the contact name. Cool.
Yep. So on top of that, the enhancement to the recently released contact groups. So previously it was just you could add and remove one contact at a time. Now you can do it with batches. So it makes it a little bit more easy to use if you use up a few less of your calls.
Sure.
And AU payroll, there's been a couple of changes. I might see if Riley wants to chip in there with some details around those.
Yeah, so we've had a few little changes on the payroll API. So the first one was back in October regarding the creation of employees. So we just changed a few details that are required around the creation of employees, primarily around the addresses. So this is more just to keep the Australian payroll API and the US payroll API a little more similar. They're sort of diverging a bit there, so we just made a few changes. It didn't seem to affect many people at all, really. So that was pretty good. And the second set of changes more recently was around we implemented the unique superannuation identifier. So this is in line with some changes in regulation and just how superannuation funds are working. It only affects the Australian payroll API. And yeah, basically the SPIN identifier that used to be used for identifying superannuation funds has been dropped, and the new identifier is called the USI, or Unique Superannuation Identifier. So if you're going to set up a new super fund within a Xero organization, you need to specify its unique, its USI in order to create it. This only applies to regulated super funds, so all your SMSF funds still function the same way. And yeah, basically anytime you were using a SPIN, now you have to use a USI. And we've updated our API to accommodate for that.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good example of as careful as we might be about preventing sort of breaking changes from leaking into the API. Sometimes we don't have any choice if there's kind of some regulatory stuff like that. But I think that's been the first time that we've ever had something like that that's kind of snuck up on us. But it's good. But again, I guess it's a good example of like how we want to work with developers who are using the API, because like Riley, we reached out to everybody that we knew it would affect and kind of gave them a heads up, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it didn't seem like there were a lot of people actually using that sort of functionality to create super funds. Most people were just using the list we already had.
Yeah, it's pretty specialized.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, what's minor enhancements, Adam? I'm keen to find out about that.
Oh, there's just a few small things we did. We added when you're retrieving the profit and loss report, you can now retrieve that using 2 tracking categories rather than just the one.
Some minor for some, but I know there was at least one developer that was hanging out for that for a long time. So
yeah,
good.
Exactly. We can now create $0 credit notes. One thing we still have to do on that front, though, is being able to update $0 credit notes. So that's halfway there.
Cool.
And we've allowed you to
tracking on
contacts. Yeah. So setting up those default tracking categories on contacts, sticking with the tracking categories thing.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So most important slide. It's the one that everybody will be disgusted at if their feature isn't on it.
Yeah.
So what we're working on next?
Yeah. So looking at the next release, allowing people to delete payments. So possibly if you've allocated a payment to an invoice, by mistake, or you need to reverse it out for some reason.
Yeah, or let's see, so if you're an e-commerce provider and you got a payment and you recorded that as a payment via the API, but then the payment bounces or something like that, then you want to remove it off the invoice so it's shown as unpaid in Xero.
Yep.
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 Cool.
So yeah, looking for a release for next week for that one. We're also working on exposing those new description fields on the items endpoint. So there's a new purchaser's description and the name field, which is sort of kind of new to items.
Oh yeah. And I think that'll also solve some issues we have at the moment, because we're a little bit out of line with the new sort of inventory view within the main application at the moment. So we have a couple of outstanding issues around description lengths of items, isn't that right?
Yeah. So if you're updating an item name or item description rather with the up towards the maximum length, we're having errors at the moment. So
yeah, if you're using like some pretty crazy description lengths, like 2,000 characters or something like that. But hey, you know what? If that's how long you want your item description to be, well, who are we to stop you? Awesome.
Cool.
And then Files API.
Yeah, the exciting thing on that list. So being able to upload and retrieve files from the file inbox in Xero for an organization, and also the different folders, so including the ability to create and manage the folders in Xero.
Yep.
So lots of cool use cases there, we think.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with the files and folders kind of stuff in Xero, if you log into even the demo company of Xero and go up to the top right-hand corner, there's a little folder view. So that's the files inbox. It lets you kind of create files. You can attach them to documents like invoices, etc., etc. But it also allows you to store files in there which aren't associated with anything. So they might just, maybe you have sort of your last tax filings or your last company report or something like that, or an insurance certificate, that kind of stuff. You think it makes sense to hold it with the rest of your financial data, or it might be something that you find handy for your accountant to also have a copy of. That's quite useful. But also there is an email address that you can actually use to route things into your files inbox. So potentially another use case that might be interesting would be, you as a user might sort of drop files in there, or you might have your telecom bill getting email directly into your files inbox, and then somebody by the API could be kind of polling that for changes and seeing what files are in there, and automatically doing some sort of OCR or whatever it is work for you to automatically code those attachments into actual documents, financial transactions. So that'd be pretty cool. So we're looking forward to getting that out there and just seeing what sort of uses people have for it. So that's what we're working on, and a little bit further out on the horizon, we've got so paging is something we want to. It's important that we want to allow people to get that in a little bit more efficient way on bank transactions and journals, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the only way to get to your line details on those at the moment is to get them one at a time. So obviously it'd be really cool to get paging on those. So.
Cool. We better get busy.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I just wanted to give a quick update on the add-on marketplace. So we launched that just towards the end of August. I think sort of as first week in September is when we sort of was fully live and had all the pages in it. So since then, obviously, we've been planning on doing some improvements to it, and I'll do a deep dive on what our sort of planned improvements are, and maybe the next Hangout or the one after that. But one thing we're really interested in is the keyword search is something that's new to the add-on marketplace, and so we've been analyzing some of the keywords and what sort of people have been using. So one outtake from just looking at how people are using the add-on marketplace to search is that there's a massive amount of search terms that have been used, over 10,000 search terms in the last couple of months. So a really long tail, but some interesting things. The most popular term so far is payroll. Now, I haven't split this out geographically. I'm sure payroll is probably more of interest for people in, say, for example, in the UK and New Zealand, where we don't have an integrated payroll product, but nonetheless interesting. Other search terms that were cropping up, inventory, CRM, quotes was another one that's cropping up. So really good that people are using the keyword search and finding things. Also, one thing we did notice is that pretty much every add-on was being searched for by keyword as well. So it just goes to show you that more and more people are going to be using the keyword search to find add-ons, and probably using the categories that we have a little bit less. But hopefully, the most important outtake though is that people are actually finding what they want. The weirdest search term that I could find in my trawl through, I didn't read all 10,000 search terms, but the weirdest one I could find was rubbish. Sadly, we don't have any rubbish add-ons. I'm sure we want to keep it that way, but you know, if somebody is in the waste collection business and they've got an awesome waste management app that can seamlessly integrate with Xero, then I'm sure we'd welcome them to the ecosystem. But most disappointing was the fact that 8 people used Zero while searching for stuff, and they weren't talking about Xero total credit notes either. So yeah, not to worry. But a little bit interesting, and maybe, as I said, in the next Hangout, I'll provide some sort of more useful data for developers to kind of get some insights into what people are searching for, and maybe that might help us build up a picture around, well, what sort of new add-ons or things that people are searching for that we don't actually currently have in the ecosystem. So draw a line to some potential opportunities for people to develop new stuff. Awesome. Cool. Just a last chance to shout out for some questions. If you've got any questions you want to ask, now's the time to do it. Just drop them in the box. I think, Riley, we've already got a few people asking us some questions. Riley's there.
Yep, we've had a few questions. So, Peter McCarroll has a question from the Google Hangout page. He's asking what the difference is between the Global Developer Day that we had in Sydney and the other XeroCons, and potentially the other developer days that we have around the place.
That's an excellent question and a fair one. So I guess at some of the ZeroCons, we don't put on a full-on developer day, a sort of a full day of content and talks and that kind of thing. It's a little bit more informal. So for example, at the last ZeroCon at Auckland, we just kind of put on a more informal developer sort of meet and greet and have a few beers with our friends at Vend and Unleashed as well. And so we didn't sort of feel... I think one of the things is that we have a lot of partners who actually attend quite a few of the ZeroCons as add-on partners. So probably doing the same event across all these at every ZeroCon doesn't make a lot of sense for them. So we probably pick one a year, which is our main developer day, which is a full day of content. And ideally, we'd rotate that around geographically. I don't think we've made a decision yet as to whether that might be in the US or in Australia for 2015. But I guess the main thing is that there will always be something at each ZeroCon, just informally at the very least, to just make sure we're connecting with people. Cool.
Excellent. And Siva has a question regarding getting the payment terms details from the contacts endpoint for customers.
Okay.
So, well, it's more of a feature request, I guess. He's stating that you can only get them contact by contact at this point. When you pull back the full list of contacts, you can't get the payment terms. I believe is correct.
I think if I'm correct, I think if you're using the pagination on contacts, then you should get the terms back all in one go. So if you get all contacts, you just get a sort of a slightly summarized view on the contacts endpoint. But if you specify pagination and you get back 100 records at a time, then you should get the payment terms on that. So it just means specifying the page parameter, which should be it is in the documentation for the contacts endpoint. So we can reduce the workload by 100, Siva, for you if you just use the pagination. It's not quite all in one go, but hopefully that should help a lot anyway.
Yep, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got another question here from David Masters. He's got a question about the payments endpoint. He's asking how can he identify payments that have been processed in Xero as multiple items?
David, that's an excellent question, and you would have really stumped us if we hadn't started looking at the payments functionality just this week. Thanks for waiting a week to ask this question. So I think what David's referring to is the fact that in Xero you can create batch payments and also batch deposits, which basically creates a whole bunch of payments against different invoices all in one go. Via the payments endpoint, there's really no correlation of which ones are in a batch and which ones aren't. That's something that we need to do, and to be honest, I don't think there's any way via the API of actually identifying those at the moment. There's nothing there at the moment, and so when we were looking at doing the deletion of payments feature, we actually decided that because you can only delete an entire batch or nothing at all, we're actually not supporting the deletion of payments which were created in batches via the API for our first release. So we'll definitely mark down a feature request there to put in some sort of identifier. Hopefully there's some sort of batch identifier that we could add into the payments endpoint, so you could then stitch together all these three payments have the same batch ID and provide that. So I'll make a note to look at that, but at the moment, unfortunately, David, there's no option there.
On that same topic, Peter McCarroll has a question or a request regarding batch receipts and payments. When will we likely be able to create them by the API?
Cool. No ETA yet, unfortunately, Peter. It's not getting a lot of demand at the moment. If there isn't a user voice thread already for that, I'll create one and link you to it. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've got a lot of things that other people are asking for. I think really useful if there is a user voice request outstanding, if you just add in what your use cases are as well, because that allows us, it's not just a matter of how many people are voting for it, but understanding what you're trying to do, and then is it a major blocker for your type of application, and even if it's not sort of like top of the list in terms of user voice votes, if it is something that, you know, sort of we can see the utility of providing, and we might see if we can sneak it in. So no ETA just yet, but we'll definitely look into it.
Excellent. Siva has another question. He's very thankful for the $0 credit notes. Very happy about that. But he's wondering if $0 invoices would be an option as well.
You can do $0 invoices at the moment. The only thing about a $0 invoice is that it immediately gets marked as paid, but it's definitely something that you can do via the API at the moment. Mm-hmm. So just to be clear though, sorry, maybe this isn't quite what Siva is after. So when I say a $0 invoice, you might have one line which has, say, $500, and then you might have another line which is a negative $500, and that totals out at zero. And the reason for that would be, well, before we did manual journals via the API, that was one way of getting a journal in, a little bit hacky, but it worked. But that is, so you do need to have at least sort of two lines balancing each other out for a $0 invoice at the moment. I don't think there's any other way of doing a $0 sort of invoice. Be interested to know if that doesn't solve what he's after, exactly what he is trying to do, because I don't think there's any way of just putting in one, unless it's a draft without any sort of lines at all, to be a zero.
Yep, so we probably need some use cases to really work out whether or not that's something we can or will do. Peter McCarroll has another question about the new contact bank details that we put in a couple of months ago. Are those details going to be available via the API? I think that's for the contact person for the bank details.
Oh, so bank details on the contact person or on context itself? So I believe, if I'm right, there's two elements on the contacts endpoint. There's a kind of like a weird summarized contact, a bank detail. Sorry, I should probably jump into the page just to have a look. But there's two types of element. There's two sorts of elements on the contacts in terms of bank details. There's an old field which we've kind of kept in because we didn't want to break anything, and then there's another field which does return what you're after, I think. Peter, right. So there's a bank account details field which gives kind of like a summarized view.
I think it's just the account number, isn't it?
Yeah. But the batch payments field, I think that's the one that has everything in it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Maybe Peter, just shoot us an email with the full details that you're looking for, and it may be available, or otherwise we can look into exposing it.
Yeah.
Tristan is after a time frame on bank transaction pagination. Whereabouts is that in the roadmap?
Yeah. So to be honest, it's kind of the fourth thing on our list, and we're actively working on 3 at the moment. I think it's probably unlikely to make it this side of Christmas because there's quite a bit of work to do around rewriting how that bank transactions endpoint works, so we can add paging to it. So it'll probably be at some point in January at best. Unfortunately, with Christmas holidays, this part of the world and things like that, we probably won't be getting back into active work until sort of the second week in January. So reality is it'll probably be sort of late January by the time we were able to get that in. Cool. All right. Seems like we've got questions aplenty today.
Yeah. There's more. Here's a more interesting one. Sort of a broader, not specific about the API. It's probably more engineering at Xero sort of subject. But Drew broadly has a question about the future of the core Xero product. Are we going at the moment? The Xero API isn't necessarily consumed by our application. Drew is interested to know if that is the future direction of product development. Are we going to consume our own API, or is the API going to continue to be a product that we offer to external developers?
Yeah, so I guess the answer is yes to both. Look, so I guess the reality is that, you know, so parts of Xero are 6 or 7 years old, and the API itself is probably 6 years old in parts as well. So there's definitely areas that are a little bit inconsistent, and I guess we've got a choice of always maintaining exact consistency across all the different endpoints, or, you know, sort of adding in improvements as we do new things as well, which does make things a little bit inconsistent, I appreciate, but I think it's for the best. In terms of the overall product strategy and where we're going, so as we modularize features in Xero, and a good example of this would be things like the new inventory functionality that's coming out. What the teams are actually doing is they're writing internal services that we can actually easily expose via the API. Similarly, the team they're working on, say, for example, the new fixed assets module again. So they're starting with an internal service that the web application can consume, and then the API can hook up to much easier as well. I don't think we're ever going to get to a day, or certainly not in the next few years at least anyway, where, you know, you're consuming exactly what the internal what the internal API is via the public API. We still need to add on a layer of authentication, and there's many facets of complexities around some of the sort of functions which we need to kind of dress up to make things a little bit more easily consumed for external developers. But as I said, as we rewrite things, we'll provide more sort of APIs as discrete things. For example, the Files API will be a discrete API, which is kind of separate from the core accounting API. So we'll have Payroll API, we'll have the accounting API, and a Files API. And again, a Files API is an example of something where we're actually doing things a little bit differently in terms of default pagination and things like that, which we haven't employed in the accounting API, as we want to maintain backwards compatibility. Cool.
Excellent.
All right. Any last ones there? Oh, I do see one which John has asked about purchase orders by the API. So purchase orders is definitely something I stood up and promised at XeroCon Sydney. Unfortunately, at the way things are tracking, we're quite a bit behind in terms of getting to that. So unfortunately, John, I don't think it's going to be in 2014. So that was me being optimistic, and apologies for that. But it's definitely something we do want to do. So it'll be early next year. Unfortunately, there's a few things that have kind of, as we've grown, we've needed to kind of sort of change some internal systems and that kind of thing, which I don't like talking about because it's only excuses. But the reality is, as we do sort of scale up, we've had to do quite a bit of work under the hood to make sure that we're not slowing down as we've had more and more people on the API. So there's been quite a lot of back-end plumbing that's happened over the last couple of months to help with that, and that's slowed us down a little bit. But definitely hearing it, and do keep me honest by calling out, and I'll make sure and give you an update on the next Hangout in December as to where we can sort of expect that to land.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. I think that's all we've got time for this Hangout. So we'll drop in a message around our next Hangout, which should be in December. I think I'm aiming for the 23rd of December. Hopefully people can join us then, both here in New Zealand, Australia, and also in the US as well. And if there are any more questions or comments you want to leave in the comments box, we'll definitely get to them over the next couple of hours as well. So looking forward to our next Hangout, and thank you very much for joining us for this one. So it's a goodbye from us here in Wellington. All the best, and go on, Regan, give us a wave too. Beautiful. And Riley over in Melbourne. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.